three most contributing factors to the LA fires are three most risks that we have. And what we need to do is look at risk mitigation, the due diligence as to whether or not we're properly prioritizing our risks and allocating our resources to those priorities. Are we providing adequate resources for fire? PVE's fire should be upgraded because right now it's just a medium high. And yet PVE spends most of our time and money on crime, even though crime doesn't even rate. 28 people died earlier this year in LA because of the fires. 16,000 structures damaged or destroyed, 250 billion in damages, and 8 large LA fires have happened since. Here is an email that our city council and PVE received, and this is 5 years old, that they stopped testing the fire hydrants 10 years ago. So it's been 15 years. Wow. According to them is because of the drought. We reduced our water consumption since 2010 by 45%. So if I showed you this whole email, which you'll see since it was sent to me by a council member, my response is, and you're not doing anything about this? This has been 4 years. I have mentioned it multiple times, no action has ever been taken. In fact, I sent through a FOIA, which is a request for records from the city, and said, do you have any records of ever flow testing or doing any type of testing on our fire hydrants? The answer is no, we have no records. Inspection is not a flow test. That's 4 years ago, and we can mitigate these.
Number you have dialed.
I'd like to introduce John Cruikshank and Desiree Myers. And they're talking on fire and water hazard and PVE.
John and I talked about this, and we've worked together before, and I just love working with John. He's wonderful.
Well, you don't know yet.
So what we did was we talked about safety on the Hill, and I just kind of put together a format, a PowerPoint for it. And then we went back and forth on certain issues as it affected RPV in particular. So I'm just going to kind of go through this, and at times John is going to jump in and bring us up to speed on some stuff in RPV. Because of the 4 cities on the Hill, RPV represents the largest, by far, amount of land and population. My name is Desiree Myers, and I'm a community advocate. As you know, I've spoken before you, in front of you before, and I advocate for certain things. Safety and fiscal responsibility, open governance. And this is John Cruikshank, and of course, he's been the mayor of RPV.
I'll do mine.
Oh, there you go. Sorry.
That's okay. No, she would do a great introduction, but I don't want her to remember all this stuff. So I know there's new members here. Many of you know who I am. I was a Rancho Palos Verdes City Council member for 7 years. I've been term limited out since December of last year. A lot of people ask me that. So I'm currently not an elected official, but I was mayor 2 times in our city. Probably the couple hardest years in our city's 50-plus year history. The first time I was mayor, we had COVID. And of course, you might remember I was one of the first elected officials to get COVID at Trump National. And explaining that to people was always a lot of fun. And then the second time I was mayor was last year. Of course, last year we had a lot of dealings with the landslide issues, which was a lot of anxiety for our residents and many of you in the audience. So obviously proud to represent my community of Rancho Palos Verdes. I've spoken in front of this group many times. This is an amazing group because it keeps growing and new members are showing up. And like I've told you, been a Republican since the first time I could vote. My first vote was for Ronald Reagan in his second term. So I'm very proud to be a Republican. And it's been hard to be a Republican for the last 20 plus years because every time you try to speak out and be proud about being a conservative, people shout you down. And I tell people don't be afraid to do that. So Des she did all the heavy lifting here. I'm going to be doing the color commentary today. So whenever she hands me the mic, I know it's my turn to speak, but I'm going to give her the mic now and let her do the heavy lifting. Here you go, Des.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So today we're going to talk about PV community safety. The goal is to provide, what we need our cities to provide is adequate safety. And what we need to do is look at risk mitigation, the due diligence as to whether or not we're properly prioritizing our risks and allocating our resources to those priorities. And I want to show you a gap. And you'll see there's action we can take on this. And then we'll follow it by Q&A. So what is adequate? Adequate is levels of risk that can be responsibly reduced and adequately communicated to the residents. So you understand what that is. And residents can then understand the levels of risk and take any appropriate action they want to take to fill any gaps. Insurance is an example of something you would do. But we have significant unaddressed safety risks. These risks can be reduced to make our families and properties safer. So when we look at risk mitigation, there's 4 steps. Here's the first step. You put a pool of what your big risks are, okay? Basically, there's about 6 of them here. Fire, our home sliding down the hill, earthquake, crime, traffic, which is collisions and pedestrian accidents, and then flooding, water intrusion like the ones we have in Malibu Cove. What rises to the top is fire, because we're in a very high fire zone. We have historic fires, and we're very similar to LA's devastating fires. And the slides, as in the ones that have occurred in our PV. What cities do is they go through something called a safety element. And this is PVEs. I know the most about PVE, by the way. So sometimes I bring that up, but it's relative to the other cities. So then they score to make sure they prioritize the risks appropriately and allocate your resources. So this is based on likelihood and impact. And you can see what they did was they put, over here would be earthquake seismic things would be your highest risk in red based on likelihood and impact. And this is wildfire over there. Meanwhile, drought has less priority. So PVE's fire, in my opinion, and you can see if you can agree, because I'm going to show you why I believe this, should be upgraded. Because right now it's just a medium high. And yet PVE spends most of our time and money on crime, more than fire, even though crime doesn't even rate. Could be because we're doing a good job of it. But also we have to consider, are we providing adequate resources for fire? And this is the due diligence RPV has, and this is what John provided. And you can see they go through a similar risk analysis. These are just numbers that come out to the similar decisions. So when we identify how big a risk is, we have to look at 2 factors, likelihood and impact. So the likelihood, if you look at Malibu and Pacific Palisades, they have exactly the same risk profile that we do. Most damaged homes and buildings were bordering urban forests. They have repeated fires that continue to occur. They are in a very high fire risk zone. They have limited ingress and egress. They have pressure from the California to build more, density without mitigating the risks, and they have limited availability of insurance. We all have stories that we know firsthand or secondhand about what's happening with the insurance companies. Impact, well, death toll, 28 people died earlier this year in LA because of the fires. 16,000 structures damaged or destroyed, 250 billion in damages, and 8 large LA fires have happened since. Now let's look at 6 months later. This could be us, right? Only 100 building permits have been issued. State and fire, city and state have onerous, unaffordable new building standards, global warming, and costs not covered by insurance. Malibu, foreign investor has already swooped in and grabbed 9 lots in a row of coastal lots for $16.5 million that they'll be building. Those won't be single family residents. And then Altadena, half of the fire sales have gone to people or nondescript entities that are buying multiple properties. We knew it was coming, right? So to fully monetize this land, which is what investors do, is they are going to build condos and rentals, luxury rentals, into density units. That's to get the most money. So this is why communities will be destroyed by this permanently. These are permanent changes. So Newsom jumps in, and within the last 2 months, he made it worse for us. He just passed 2 laws that says that you can now do all this density housing, and you can bypass mitigating the safety risks you introduce. For instance, if there's limited ingress-egress, meaning the ability for you to evacuate and the ability for first responders to come in, that doesn't have to be mitigated, and many other things. Under the cloak of CEQA. CEQA is the environmental safety, but that includes safety to human beings as well. So new density projects will make cities less safe, and fire risks are now being increased by humans. Yeah. So when we look at how to reduce fire risks, we look at two factors: reducing the impact and reducing the likelihood. So that would be like having functioning fire hydrants and brush clearance. So the three most contributing factors to the LA fires are the three most risks that we have, and we can mitigate these. Number one, we have insufficient defensible barriers. That's the fire abatement cutting. And we have inoperable fire hydrants and empty reservoirs. We have two reservoirs, by the way. We have one in the city of PVE, and we'll hit that in just a moment. I'll show you that. So fire risks are being mismanaged. We have the same fire risk profile as PVE, and we have the three highest fire risks. But the good news is all are actionable. So let's take a look at the first one, provide a defensible barrier. So LA County Fire Code says they need 200 feet of defensible space cleared out for them from our house, from the buildings. And in PVE in particular, we only have 20 feet because we wanted to save money and we didn't have an affordable contractor. So that is from the property line, not the house, but generally, overwhelmingly, actually, that's going to be inadequate and closer to much less than 100 feet. I don't know what the other cities provide, but you may want to know. John, do you know what RPV has?
So, let's see if this works. So RPV does have 100 foot from all the structures. And how many RPV residents are in the audience? Yeah, quite a few. So you probably all received letters from LA County Fire in regards to that. But they do require 100 foot from the structures as required during fire season.
Often people are confused by the fact that the fire department is telling people to do their properties, but the cities have a responsibility because they're supposed to make sure it's 200 foot from that. So if you've got that property line right at 50 feet or 100 feet, the rest of that is supposed to be taken up by the cities.
Yeah,
Does your city do that?
Yeah, I was going to say, so our city, as you probably know, about 1,500 acres within our city is owned by Rancho Palos Verdes, but it's managed by the Land Conservancy. And so the Land Conservancy, through the city's partnership, actually does that brush clearance on the city's property to make sure that that's defensible space is maintained.
For up to 100 feet from the buildings?
That's correct.
Okay. So just know that's a bit short from the 200 foot, but PVE is even shorter. And thank you for the Land Conservancy. I wanted to ask you about that. So number two, operable fire hydrants. So here is an email that our city council and PVE received that tells us, and this is 5 years old, that they stopped testing the fire hydrants 10 years ago. So it's been 15 years. Wow. And according to them is because of the drought. They stopped testing them because of the drought, which is interesting because in the future I'm going to show you we reduced our our water consumption since 2010 by 45%. I'll get to that in a second. That's Metro Water. But this says they stopped testing it. This is LA Fire. Now, LA County Fire provides PVE fire services and the other three cities on the Hill. So they're talking about what they're doing. It says here, the station captains will meet the local water company representatives to come up with a game plan that best serves the particular community. So the first thought is, I'll just ask my city what they receive for that. I doubt anything. Over the last 10 years, our practices of, quote, testing fire hydrants has changed due to water shortage. The engine companies will no longer flow test water into the streets to test the fire hydrants. They won't check to see if water comes out. So they certainly aren't checking for the adequate pressure. Recommended inspections will include drive-bys to identify leaks and coming back on brush and address any other visual issues. So we don't know if they're arrested, they're not coming out, we don't know if the water lines are having issues. Now, John and I talked about this week and he did some research. He's going to talk about an RPV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so Of course, I still have a couple connections at the city. And when we were putting the slides together over the weekend, I'm like, I'm going to reach out to our city manager, Armaranian, who I think the world of. He's a great city manager, cares about it. I told him, I said, how often are we doing this? And he said, let me contact Cal Water. And that's what he did. And they got back to him within less than 24 hours. And basically they said that they have annual inspections and documenting visual conditions of all the hydrants. They do routine preventive maintenance on every hydrant every 5 years. Apparently, you probably remember the big water project when they replaced the lines, the trunk lines, and those huge pipes were going in. So you probably know Cal Water is our water provider. They provide water for the entire peninsula. And those water lines, there isn't a separate fire water line. All the water is either domestic or fire. It all comes from the same pipe. And so that pipe provides the water to your home as well as the hydrants. And so basically the crews that operate the hydrants, they conduct fire flow tests, flushing and main repair during their annual maintenance program and their 5-year program. So it probably isn't quite as dire as the initial answer that Des got, but I mean, once again, going back to all of us as being residents of this community, anytime you have any concern or question about anything and you feel like you're not getting answers to it, you deserve answers. So make sure you're contacting your city council members to get those answers for you. And if they're not getting the answers for you, then there's a problem. Most of the other council members know everyone, and I still know all the council members. So if you guys are having a problem with any of your cities, let me know. And I'll contact them and I'll make sure we get some answers because, you know, Des is very good about doing research and getting data. And so I was very pleased to know my city got back to me within 1 day to get me this answer. But I was also on the city council. That kind of helps. The average resident out there might not get the same answer, but in our city it's a little better than that. So there you go.
Thank you. And the point is to get the accurate answer. So if I showed you this whole email, which you'll see since it was sent to me by a council member, my response is, and you're not doing anything about this? This has been 4 years. Wow. I have mentioned it multiple times, no action has ever been taken. This is new information to me. In fact, I sent through a FOIA, which is a request for records from the city, and said, do you have any records of ever flow testing or doing any type of testing on our fire hydrants? The answer is no, we have no records. Nobody was even curious. So what they actually sent out to respond to any of the pushback that I've been pushing back and bringing this to light in the community is they said, oh, well, the Metro Water says that they do, or Cal Water said that they inspect them, which equates to a drive-by. What we need to see is records that these fire hydrants were flow tested, and we want to know that the pressure is adequate and up to the standards of the National Fire Protection Association. That's what we need to know. And I don't know that we have this in PVE, and I'm impressed with what we're hearing so far, just in the last 24 hours. This has actually been going on for years in my city. So, yes, a little less than responsive.
So there hasn't been any, uptick in wanting to do something about this with the PV City Council after the fires in the Palisades? I mean, you would think
Zero.
that all of a sudden
Zero. As a matter of fact,
realize that they have a lot of liability here if they don't do something about it.
and somebody just asked, and so they were responding in defense in an update, in an email to the city about what Cal Water said, and it says, well, we do an inspection. Inspection is not a flow test. They have no records. We don't know. I know that the fire hydrant on my streets are never tested. I would notice. I know it's not happening. So I'm still checking into this because we're going to make sure, why are there no records of it? Why doesn't anybody even care to ask for a record? I would want to know. That's what staff is for. That's what councils are for. But anyways, if you saw this whole thing, you'd see my response here going, and you're not doing anything about this? That's 4 years ago. So LA County provides fire services for all 4 cities. So some of this, or most of it, is applicable to the others, likely. So we actually, in our city, have a contract with the fire department. And I'm reading to you an actual page 2, that says, we will annually inspect all fire hydrants in the city to ensure they are mechanically operable and capable of delivering water. That's completely contrast to the email we just received. So what's happening is that we are paying $1,400 a year per home for our fire services, but we're not getting it. And nobody in the city has any records of holding them accountable for something very fundamental in their contract. And we have it in writing. So we're entitled to the safety that we contracted and paid for to keep our families and properties and to reduce our risks. So why would we leave our firefighters without the most fundamental tool they need, water, to keep our families and homes safe? This squirt gun. Who decided this for us? Why weren't we told? And why do our council, and I'll say council, not councils.
Thank you.
Why did they have no say in this? Why weren't they included in this decision? And who's going to go to bat for us? Let's talk about the reservoirs. That's the third thing that we can do something about. So this is PVE's reservoir. It's in Malaga Cove, and it's in the forest right below Villa del Monte. It provided drinking water for about 200 families. So it's not as big as the other one, but it's still viable and valuable. Because if we ever had something like an earthquake and people need drinking water, they're going to want this access to local water, especially since right now we're getting all of our water off the hill, and so we don't have local control of it. So water is what we're going to need for a big catastrophe. But even for a smaller one, we're going to want to know that there's a backup for those hydrants. So it's been empty for a decade after there was a breach, but there was no malfunction. So I just talked about what would happen if we had a major disaster. So access to local drinking water does give us safety. So we also have a PVE reservoir. It's been around since about 1940s or something, and it provides 326 gallons of water, but it's closed. So it was closed for upgrades in 2009. It reopened in 2019. It was fully operational at that time and then closed again in 2022. And, but there's conflicting reports about whether it's going to reopen. And this is information, by the way, John also provided. Thank you again. So all the water on PV is being pumped up from off the hill. Disasters could interrupt electrical pumping that we need to get that water. So of course, we want to know that that's being tested with their backup generators for the electricity, and know that that disaster preparation has already been put in place because we have to rely on cities off the hill. So the PV reservoir, what's different? So Metropolitan Water controls it, and they claim that there's been a 45% reduction in water consumption because we did what they asked us to do since 2010. But that's a problem. So that's a problem because it reduced the flow that was needed, so the water was stagnant, it was sitting there longer, and their ability to deal with the bacteria that was created by that was a problem. And so they said that long-term future use of the reservoir is under evaluation. So they don't know if they're going to open it again. And then LA County Fire wrote that it's being fixed, but he didn't use any indication leading us to believe that it's just going to be fixed, and then it'll be back online. So we don't know. So why does the information differ? And is there any intention of reopening the reservoir? This is something I feel that our city council should pursue. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I was going to say that we were told that the reason that the Rolling Hills Estates, the 326 million gallon reservoir, is no longer needed because there's now a bypass. But to me, a bypass is just another pipe coming from somewhere else. And I think the city of LA had that same sort of situation, another pipe coming from somewhere else. But once either that pipe's cut off, now you don't have that water. So to me, redundancy is smart, just from an engineering perspective. I mean, and the other thing is that we rely on electricity to pump the water actually up to our homes. And you have those huge pumps that are up off Crenshaw Boulevard. And Southern California Edison, they always say we're an above ground utility line. That's why we always fight with them to get our lines put underground, and they won't do it. So you've got these lines that are above ground. There's a fire, the lines get burned, or they create the fire. And now the electricity is not getting to those pumps. Now they do have diesel generators there to kick on. And so they do have a little bit of redundancy there, but how long do those diesel generators last before the water no longer gets to certain areas? So to me, I'd rather see more redundancy than less. And so Des's point's well taken. I think we all need to be continually asking questions of our city council and our city staff members of that, and to prove to us that we feel comfortable in their answers. Like, don't just take their answers and say, oh, okay. I mean, if it doesn't sound right to you, like I always say, if I don't understand what you're saying, I need you to repeat it. Do the same thing. Don't walk away until you feel like you've gotten an answer that makes sense to you. Because if it doesn't make sense to you, it probably doesn't make sense to them either. And so they're just telling you that. And I've learned that over the years that I'm very cynical, probably not as cynical as Des, but I love her cynicism and I love her investigatory, because we need more people like that, right? I mean, that are just digging in and getting information. You take it over.
Thank you, John. The point is to find things that are critically wrong and fix them. And if that requires a level of cynicism, then it is what it is. Does that help? So available funding, there's 5 sources. So the cities can provide funding if they have it available in their coffers. We have a peninsula-wide safety committee that provides emergency preparedness and public safety. I think that that's huge. This group of the 4 cities coming together can challenge the county on some of the things that are happening. They can also provide common resources and shared expenses. We have county funding, 2 of them. Measure E just passed. It provides fire abatement funding to the cities. And County Agricultural Commission provides trimming for less than we've been paying for it. California State provides money. And there's all sorts of resources under FEMA to pay for preparedness as well as hardening. They'll even train your staff for free on how to apply for it. Talking fast. So accountability, who pays? Well, California's passed the Government Claims Act, which specifically says public entities cannot be held liable if they fail to provide adequate fire protection, even if they've committed to providing it. So you can pay for it. You can't sue them for not providing it. Yeah, that was rather predictive, wasn't it? In summary, optimally, the city should collaborate for efficiencies. PV has some serious fire risks that should be abated, and there's 3 areas that we should take a look at in particular. Because we do have danger, this is our largest dangerous fire here. That's it. Thank you.
So the risk factor of PV is very, very high. Okay.
For fire, yeah.
Yes. But it was brought to my attention when I said I was coming here and to listen to John and Desi that our risk factor for the fire, like in the Palisades, isn't as quite as high in terms of the wind velocity.
Well, okay, so we were all around when the fires were occurring, right? Do you remember how hard the wind was for us as well? Yes. So, once again, I mean, I think the people in Altadena can say, well, we're not in a high fire zone. We're never going to have a fire here. And you look at the homes that all burnt altogether. And actually, if you look at a lot of the homes, they're gone and the trees are actually still there. And what's interesting is you can be very smart about landscape. I was going to mention this, that we're going to be asked to be clear cutting 20 feet around your homes. And I've already done that to my home. And I love trees and vegetation like all the rest of you do. But unfortunately, for us to be good neighbors and to be smart about it, we're going to have to be smarter about the way we're doing our landscaping around our homes. And that's coming, like that's not going to stop. And so the reason a lot of those homes ended up burning down is because you had non-native trees like palm trees and eucalyptus and acacia right near our homes. And it's a huge threat to your home. So I would say start thinking about that, because your insurance companies are already telling you, I'm sure, to do that. And make sure you do that, because that's hugely important. But the wind thing, we have the same threat as anyone else. And so we need to be taking all the same precautions, all the precautions necessary. It's hugely important. And by the way, RPV's #1 threat is earthquake and then fire. So both of them, don't forget about earthquake safety as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number you have dialed